"If you open that door, we die," Jason Bradley roared as the rusty pickup skidded sideways across the empty desert highway outside Tucson, Arizona, while 3 black SUVs closed in behind them at terrifying speed. The former Marine had survived Kandahar, roadside bombs, and firefights that still haunted his dreams every single night, but none of that compared to the fear he felt now with his wife, Charlotte Grace, sitting beside him. Her hands shook as she clutched the pistol Jason had forced her to learn to use after he returned from Afghanistan, a broken man who trusted nobody. 2 nights earlier, Jason had uncovered something he was never supposed to see while working security for a private military contractor near the border. Secret shipments of weapons, cash, and narcotics hidden inside government cargo trucks. When he copied the evidence onto a flash drive, one of the supervisors caught him escaping the compound, and since then, they had been hunted across Arizona like animals. Jason drove through the darkness with bloodshot eyes and barely enough fuel left to reach Phoenix, where a journalist friend had promised to expose everything publicly. Suddenly, the engine coughed and died. "No, no, come on!" Jason slammed the steering wheel, but it was too late. The SUVs surrounded them in seconds, headlights blinding the truck from every direction. Armed men stepped out slowly with rifles aimed directly at the windshield, while the desert wind carried sand across the road. One tall man in a black tactical jacket approached the driver's side and calmly smiled. "You should have stayed a hero, Bradley," he said. "Now hand over the drive, or your wife dies first." Charlotte froze in terror, but Jason's eyes changed instantly, the same cold stare he once had during the final battle in Kandahar, when he carried 2 wounded Marines through enemy fire, while the rest of his squad was killed around him. He leaned slightly toward Charlotte and whispered, "When I move, run." Before anyone could react, Jason exploded into motion. He kicked open the truck door, smashed it into the nearest gunman, and fired 2 shots before the others even understood what was happening. The desert erupted into chaos as bullets tore through the old pickup and shattered the windows. Jason grabbed Charlotte's hand and pulled her into the darkness beyond the road, while flashlights and gunfire chased them through the rocks and dry cactus fields. They ran for nearly 15 minutes without stopping, Jason navigating through the terrain using instincts burned into him during years in Afghanistan. But suddenly, Charlotte gasped and collapsed behind a large stone, blood spreading across her shoulder. "Jason," she whispered weakly. For a moment, panic hit him harder than any firefight ever had. He ripped part of his shirt to stop the bleeding, while helicopters and engines echoed somewhere far behind them. Charlotte grabbed his arm tightly and confessed something that made his heart stop. Before they fled, she had secretly sent copies of the files to several reporters and federal agents because she knew Jason might sacrifice himself trying to protect her. Tears filled her eyes as she said, "You taught me not to be afraid anymore." Jason stared at her silently, overwhelmed by guilt for dragging her into this nightmare, but there was no time left. The mercenaries were getting closer. He kissed her forehead, hid her inside a narrow space between the rocks, then stood up and loaded the rifle he had stolen during the ambush. What happened next felt exactly like Kandahar all over again. Jason stepped into the open desert and began drawing the attackers away from Charlotte, firing carefully and moving between rocks while the men hunted him through the darkness. One by one, he took them down until only the leader remained, the same man in the black jacket. The mercenary aimed his pistol and laughed bitterly. "You really think anybody still cares about Marines?" But before he could pull the trigger, police helicopters flooded the desert with massive searchlights. Federal agents and Arizona SWAT vehicles stormed the area from every direction, because the files Charlotte sent had already reached the media. Exhausted and bleeding heavily, Jason dropped to one knee as officers surrounded the surviving mercenaries. When Charlotte finally ran toward him crying, Jason could barely stay conscious, but he still managed to wrap his arms around her. And for the first time since Kandahar, the Marine who survived hell finally believed that maybe his war was over.